that even if you may be like me, my kids are grown and I don't have to worry about education anymore, so I'm not even going to think about it anymore, right? And my grandchildren, they're all preschoolers right now, but both of their parents, thankfully, have decided we think we want to homeschool our children. And so I like that. So, okay, I don't need to worry about what the world is doing about education. The problem is my grandkids might want to get married someday. And how is the young man or the young woman that they're going to marry be educated? Or I run a publishing company and I might need to hire somebody someday. And how have they been educated? And I pastor a church. I told the church the other day I plan to retire when I'm 95. Excuse me. So I still have almost 40 years to go on that, but it'll be like this church and any church. It'll be people who come in. They're going to be, guess what? People who have been educated by our system that is out there. So I don't know of any life that you could have today that that is not impacted by education philosophy, education worldview in some way. You know, there was a guy named Dewey. You probably heard of him, Thomas Dewey, right? Thomas Dewey is often called the father of public education. And he was the founder of the Dewey Decimal System, and he was a prolific writer. It wasn't really that he knew anything, he just wrote a lot. And this is one of the keys to becoming famous and remembered is write a lot of stuff. He wrote a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. My guess is if you were to read all the stuff that Dewey wrote, you would say, Dewey doesn't know what he's talking about on most of what he writes. And yet he envisioned an education system, a public education system, which the United States adopted, and the formula basically was, his idea was you've got to have an education system that will shape the society like you want it to be. Okay, we understand that, right? And yet he held a very different worldview than most of the society in his day. And I think Thomas Dewey understood the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Get them while they're young. Change this. You know, in the most liberal states today, and you are not one of those, but New Mexico is, and in the most liberal states today, and I'm sure it's you see even the push here, there is the move to educate children at an earlier and earlier age. In our state, they will take them now at 3 years old. You can put your child in public education, and they will keep your child now. The state legislature just passed free education for all New Mexicans. By the way, we're number 51 of the 50 states in education. It takes special math. Puerto Rico is ahead of us. We are 51st in education. We used to be 49th, and we were always grateful for Mississippi, but Mississippi has surpassed us now. So what's their solution? Well, let's start them earlier and keep them longer. That's the solution, and fix it. Well, the challenge is, it's shaping the thinking, and it's purposefully shaping the thinking. We would rather have them at 3 and keep them till they're 21 than 6 or 7 and get rid of them when they're 17 or 18. We just don't have enough time to shape the world the way we want to shape it. Now, let's talk about education. You notice that, I think in the book, beginning on page 10, that there are 6 parts to this. And let me tell you how it breaks down just a little bit. We're going to start out talking here about classical education, and that is going to take part 1 and part 2, classical education. And then all of this is for grade school, and then we will talk about Christian education in grade school. That's part 3 and 4. And then we're going to talk about public education, parts 5 and 6. And so there is the the map which we are going on. And all of these will be broken down basically in the same way. We're going to talk about curriculum philosophy, classroom philosophy, teaching philosophy, the marks of an education under this plan, and where you find it. Let's start out with classical education. Classical education, let's talk the curriculum before we talk about the classroom philosophy. The curriculum of classical education is really broken up into three parts: the grammar, the logic, and the rhetoric. And it, for the most part, your grandparents, if you're old enough, were classically educated. It really has been probably since the 20s and 30s, really, that maybe into the 40s that you found very much classical education. It's had a little bit of a revival today among some Christian education. We'll talk about Christian education in a little bit. But classical education was always divided into three parts. How many of you went to a place that was called on the sign grammar school? Got a few grammar school people. Now, you're much older than I am. By the time that I came along, it was elementary school. And changed from grammar school to elementary school. There really was a thinking shift in making that change. It's no longer the grammar school, now it's the elementary school. Now, we all looked at it and thought, well, it's just, elementary sounds better than grammar, and there's a lot more than grammar. Grammar is just letters, that's all there is. And they learn a lot more than letters, so it's elementary school. They learn the elementary kind of things. Well, it was really more than just that, how you name it. Grammar was the basic building blocks of knowledge. I am convinced, by the way, the classical educational idea of learning that predates Christianity. Really, it goes back into the Greek world. The idea that you start out a child and you give them building blocks. You give them the grammar. You give them the ABCs and the 1, 2s, 3s. You give them the reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is all elementary school does today, right? That and gender education and fluidity and all these other kind of things, that all of these agendas that are well beyond grammar. Now, back in the earliest days of classical education, there was this idea that you fill a brain at a certain age when they're young and that brain is supple. You fill it with lots of facts, lots of information. Some of you probably in grammar school can remember when you were given a long list of dates maybe, and you were supposed to learn those dates. Or you were given 50 states and you had to learn the capitals of those 50 states, right? Or you were given a multiplication table and you were just supposed to memorize that multiplication table, right? And there is an age, I'm convinced, when the mind will accept all that, the mind will seat all that and lock it in. And any of you, again, who are out of grammar school by now, you have already figured out, later on, it's much harder to learn that stuff. In the third grade, was for me anyway, I was supposed to learn the multiplication tables. But it did not seem very practical to me. And I didn't learn the multiplication tables. And just about every day of my life since then, I have thought, that would be handy information. To figure out what is 6 times 9. And not have to go, let's see, where's my phone? And when a school did well in grammar school, it's when every child in that grammar school could pass a time test, boom, 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 just spit out the information, there it is. And classical education took that approach is, hey, the basic building blocks of knowledge, stick it into their mind in grammar school. Later, they would come to logic. Now, logic was when a child began to connect the dots. They began to put this piece of knowledge with that piece of knowledge, and they began to have some aha moments. We didn't worry about that much in the younger years in the grammar school. All we need them to know is the knowledge. By the way, let me stop right here and say in biblical education, that is you coming to know the Bible, regardless of what age you are, I would say this is a pretty good philosophy, is take a few years and just get the content down. Just know what's there. We've already talked about that a little bit in the last session. And to come to that place again where I know there's 66 books in the Bible, and there's 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. It's Genesis, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We'll stop right there. And all of the bits and pieces. And yet even today, if you were to pick up, some of you went to church, you used to go to church and you had the quarterly, remember? If you were to get a quarterly today, do y'all have quarterlies? I didn't think so. There's not a good one out there. If you were to get a quarterly today for, I don't know, let's say the second graders, what you would find is it's not teaching second graders biblical content, it's teaching them some application in life. It's teaching them some logic lesson or some rhetoric lesson, as we'll see here later. And these kids are growing up literally with no Bible knowledge. Now, I would venture to say that that's happening in public education and to some degree even Christian education as well, because their minds have never been given those basic building blocks of knowledge. Come to know these things. Rather, we start them in kindergarten or the first grade or the second grade, and already we're doing all these logic kind of things to put them together. It makes no sense to them because their minds can't really even handle logic, and they don't have the information for the logic. But it started out grammar and then logic. That's when you connect one idea to another. And then the graduation, really, if you would, from this classical education, before you went on to college anyway, the graduation from this was rhetoric. Rhetoric is the ability to convince somebody. The ability, whether it's the written word or the spoken word, or it doesn't have to be beautifully spoken. It just has to be convincingly spoken. And to come to the end with that ability to communicate solid conclusions for the betterment of society. That's the rhetoric. This was the path that was taken. Now, if you take the areas of knowledge that you would say every child in our society needs to know this, I think you would agree with me. You could probably narrow it down fairly easily to, I don't know, reading, writing, arithmetic. Let's throw some history in there and some science in there. How's that? Reading, writing. And as a matter of fact, you don't even ever have to have those completely as a subject because they learn to read. And if you learn to read, what can you read about? Anything. What's that old PBS show that used to say? I remember it from when my kids were watching back in those days. Reading is the magic key that takes you where you want to be. Who was that? What show was that? Well, maybe so. I don't remember it being named that, but anyway. So that's the curriculum philosophy. Now, the classroom philosophy was the one-room schoolhouse. I suspect around here somewhere, you could find an old one-room schoolhouse, right? There's probably still an old building somewhere, and you drive by, so that was the one-room schoolhouse back in the day. There's one in my neighborhood. It's an old adobe building, actually. That was the one-room schoolhouse. And, of course, if you watch Little House on the Prairie, anything like that, they met in the one-room schoolhouse. Probably in most country settings anyway, up until maybe World War II, it was the one-room schoolhouse. Maybe they divided it into 2 or 3 rooms, but their one-room schoolhouse, it worked well because children helped each other. This teacher that had maybe a high school education, or maybe she went to a little teaching college for a year or 2 years before she was set out to be the teacher in it. She could have the older kids teach the younger kids, and all of it was working together because these older kids were working on logic and rhetoric, and they already had all these facts, and so they could all work on it together in a one-room classroom with teaching themselves the material through repetition, through speaking, through interaction with the world around them, through reading, through practice, and the older children reinforce their ideas in the teaching. That is the basic part of how a classroom worked. Now, I suspect in both Christian education and public education, the idea of a one-room schoolhouse would just be anathema. There's absolutely not. There's no way that it could be done. Nobody would learn anything. Well, it actually worked for a long time, didn't it? And it worked quite well. Now, the teaching philosophy for classical education. Let's look at the teaching philosophy, the marks of an educated child, and where you find classical education on page 11. Was that the teaching philosophy is that school is not life. School is not something that should dominate a child's life. Teaching can be done in a lot of places and can be done by a lot of methods, largely built upon a child's responsibility. And classical education really never had any kind of standardized teaching. We just looked to little Johnny and said, can he read? Does he know his multiplication tables? Does he know does he have the state capitals? Or whatever the curriculum designed and all this bucket of knowledge there, the teaching philosophy was, how can this kid learn this knowledge and then later connect some of the dots and put this together? And the teaching philosophy then was that a child under classical education was encouraged to master the material before going on. So if you had someone in the third grade, if you wanted to call them that, and let's just suppose they did not learn their multiplication tables very well, what happened? They camped. They figured out a way to say, you're not going on any further until you learn your multiplication tables. But I don't want to. It doesn't matter. You have to have this knowledge before you can go on. And incidentally, by the way, you remember you talked about, Grandpa's 8th grade education and how he only went to the 8th grade. They understood, 8th grade was about the time you went into logic. Classical education understood that you'll figure out the logic and the rhetoric in the areas that you need to in life. If you don't want more official training for it, that's okay. Up through the 8th grade, we can give you all of the volumes of information that you're going to need. All the facts we can put into your head by the 8th grade, and then you can go out and you can teach yourself. Now that you know how to read, you can begin to put some of the logic dots together and some of the rhetoric dots together, and many of them did. I was listening to an audiobook on the way here on Potsdam, the conference after World War II with, who was it, Truman and Churchill and Stalin. I was seeing if anyone knew their facts. They were, the author, who is probably well too educated for the task, kept chastising President Truman because he only had a high school education. And that buffoon from Missouri with his high school education. So all he had was a high school. I don't know how many times I heard this afternoon that Truman only had a high school education. Now, under classical education, we understood that with an 8th grade education, you got enough. You can figure it out, and you can rule the world. You can be the leader of the free world with just an 8th grade education, was the teaching philosophy. What was an educated child under classical education? It's a self-controlled adult who displays virtue and wisdom. And classical education always had a worldview that was there. But if you grow up, if you turn out a self-controlled adult who displays virtue and wisdom, you got an educated child. And that educated child can then set their own freedom, set their own liberties, set their own ways, set their own directions based upon what they know. Now, where do you find it outside of the past? You find it in some homeschool curriculum, Christian curriculum. There's a few secularized schools which which will use it. Typically, charter schools will use a classical education approach. Excuse me. Not all charter schools using a classical education approach, but you could probably find one that did. Now, if you find it today, it is almost certainly going to call itself classical. So if you find something that says classical education, what they mean is grammar, logic, rhetoric. And this is what they're going to do. Now, just because they call themselves classical education does not mean they use grammar, logic, rhetoric. But classical education is, again, if your grandparents were before, say, before World War II, like mine were, classical education is basically what they got. Would any of you like to go up against your grandmother in math knowledge? If your grandmother was back from that generation. I remember my grandmother one time talking about some cooking, and she made this cobbler that I really liked. And I was probably, I don't know, college age, and I was trying to figure out, Grandma, how do you make this cobbler? And she says, well, you put in, a little flour, and you put in some baking soda, and I said, well, how much flour? And she says, well, how many people do you have? And it's the first time I ever found out that baking used to be done by ratios, not by recipes. And she immediately said that it's, I think she said, 1 teaspoon of baking soda for every cup of flour that you put in. And you can grow you need to cook for 100. We just put in enough flour for 100. And then you know how much sugar and how much baking soda and how much milk and all these things kind of. And she did some math in her head, and I immediately said, I didn't know she was doing math when she was making cobbler, when the whole family was coming. But she could figure it out just based upon that. And but today, if you see it, if you're looking for it, go look for classical education, and then dig into it a little bit more and make sure classical education is actually what is involved there. Now, let's talk about Christian education. There are, I'm sure in this community and every other community nearly, there are Christian schools, a private Christian school, Christian education. And some of them are very good, and some of them are Christian education. And they're not any better than anywhere else. But what is Christian education? The curriculum philosophy for Christian education, it largely mirrors public education, but with biblically friendly content. My beef with Christian education is they have taken the same curriculum philosophy as the public school. If I was going to start a Christian school, I would say, well, why don't we just use a completely different philosophy to begin with? Let's not just baptize the math book and put a few verses in there to make it look like it's, this is a real godly education we're getting here because, we mentioned some mathematician who happened to be a Christian. Much of Christian education today, I think, fails in its curriculum. It doesn't have a curriculum philosophy. It just adopts, again, the public school philosophy, and it has some biblically friendly content. Now, I'm happy with biblically friendly content. I would rather a child, if your only choice is something that's biblically unfriendly and biblically friendly, okay, I'm good for biblically friendly. Most Christian colleges you go to today, and by the way, I should say, I went to public school through the through the 8th grade. I was in public school. In high school, I went to a Christian high school, a small Christian high school that was started by Methodist missionaries back in the 20s. And it was a school up in northern New Mexico, and they saw, hey, here's a good opportunity. We should start a school. And it was still going, years and years later, by the 80s. I went to that school. But you know what the United Methodist Church was even by the 1980s. It was probably what a good conservative public high school is today. They were friendly towards Christians. They were Christian teachers. You could talk about the Bible. You could open the Bible and read the Bible. And we had chapel once a week, in which usually we learned something about the environment. But it was the same education that you would get anywhere else. It was just Christian friendly. Then I went to a Christian college, and what I found at the Christian college and what I still find at Christian colleges today is the education is the same thing. It's not any better. It's not any worse. It's just that you can be a Christian and not be made fun of. And maybe you can find another Christian spouse there. Is the education any different? No, it's the same thing. I think Christian education needs to, I think there's a place for Christian education. I just think it needs to figure out who it is and become something that is uniquely Christian in its educational approach. But if few, if any, substantive differences are there in the roadmap to an educated child. If you were to take the curriculum of a public school and the curriculum of a Christian school and set down what are the standards, what are the things they're going to learn, look at what they learn in the third grade here, what they learn in the third grade there, you're going to find it's all the same except the Christian school has a Bible class. And that's basically the only difference. And they pray before lunch. Now again, I'm all for a Bible class and praying before lunch. But maybe Christian educators ought to come and say, what could really a uniquely biblical Christian education be? How could we educate children who are going to look very different in this? The classroom philosophy is the same thing as the public schools. It is age-graded. Work your way through. You start in September, you finish in June, and you graduate and you go on to the next grade. There's no substantive difference in Christian education classroom philosophy. How about the teaching philosophy? Same thing. What do you have again? There is a teacher who teaches a curriculum that is there. It is designed to enable the child to recite information and interact with a biblical worldview. I'm glad for that. But again, outside of the fact that you're going to hear some Christian references, I'm not sure you could discern the difference between the Christian sixth grade class and the public education sixth grade class. It's going to look the same, it's going to smell the same, it's going to operate the same, it's going to have the same schedule. It's just going to be kind of a nice environment. Which again, I'm all for a nice environment, and I'm all for prayer every now and then, and I'm all for taking prayer requests and some of the things that you're going to find. And it is going to focus on a biblical worldview, and it probably is going to have a memory verse, and it's probably going to teach them to be a young earth creationist and some of these things that are important to us. But basically, the Christian education is just taking the public school information and baptizing it, making it, adding a few things into it. The marks of an educated child for a Christian education is a good church member who can pass tests and get good grades. Why does the local church have a Christian school? So that they'll have good church members who can pass tests. They get good grades, they graduated, they all got on their standardized testing, they got, a 22.8 or whatever the scale is, and here they are. Look, we've got well-educated children on standardized tests, and they're good church members too. They tithe, they are baptized, they're all the standards of a good evangelical church. This is what we've got right here. The marks of an educated child. Where to find it? Mostly church or denominationally based institutions. Obviously, you can find one. I'm sure you have Christian schools here, right? It's not uncommon for. It's pretty strong in independent fundamentalist churches. They'll say, "Let's have a school." It's a lot of. Bible churches may have one, or join together in having one, or just a community, a few moms and dads from the community that gather together to start one. They're out there, and they're not terribly hard to find. Now let's go to public education. The curriculum philosophy, agenda-based education, increasingly minimalistic on facts. Now, I don't know if our public educators would agree with me or not, but probably would, that more and more the facts are, there's not time for those. We've got to shape society. This is why things like critical race theory is such a discussion in our society, or why the thing in Florida, what's the actual name of the law they passed? I can only remember what its enemies call it. Don't say gay. Why is there this Disney in Florida and all that kind of stuff? If you've had the news on any in the last several weeks, you've probably heard about it. But here's a state law that says we're not going to talk about sexuality in kindergarten, first, second, or third grade. You bigot. She said, nor should you. Now, if you are going to talk about gender and sexuality in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, what do you have to set aside? Because there are only so many hours in the day, right? You got to get rid of recess, maybe. You got to get rid of lunch. You got to get rid of math. I don't know, multiplication tables, some of these kind of things, because we've got gender fluidity to talk about. And to put that stuff into a curriculum does mean, okay, we got to be minimalistic on something else, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And again, I think, and it would be an interesting study to do, to compare, I went to first grade in 1971, to compare a first grade curriculum in 1971 to a first grade curriculum in 2022, I think would be enlightening, right? In the increase of the agenda and the decrease of the facts. Even, how many of you remember seeing Dick run? See Dick run, see Spot run, see Jane run. That was our readers? Is that what we called them back then? Learning how to read in those basic words. In some of what I see, and I don't see a whole lot, honestly, but some of what I see in reading curriculum, I look at that and say, there's an agenda there. There's agenda built into it, and much more important than the reading. The curriculum philosophy is agenda-based in public education. Too many times it's against the worldview that we would have in that agenda. The classroom philosophy allowed the child to interact with truths, which include agenda as much as information, and to grow comfortable with these truths. Now, instead of, again, here are the facts, Johnny, learn them. How do you feel about this? What does this do to you when you hear this? And that interaction with the truth. As a matter of fact, if you read Thomas Dewey, that was very much a part of the way he felt that a child should learn, is just to interact with these things and feel these things and let these things guide you and you guide them. And rather than this, rote kind of 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3. I know I got the ones part. I did that. The ones and the zeros I'm really good at. We won't go into the threes. But anyway, rather than boom, 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 learn these facts, is how does this make you feel? Interact with this. Live with this for a little while. Try this one on. See if it works. And the classroom philosophy is getting more and more into that. Now, obviously, I should say, and I think these gentlemen would agree with me, a lot of it depends, a huge amount of it does depend on who is the teacher in the classroom and what she or he going to do with that curriculum. How are they going to handle this? Here's the philosophy that's coming. But in a generalized way, if you look at the teachers' unions, if you look at the curriculum writers across the country, it's done here. And by the way, California, who has the largest textbook audience there is because of their population, their Board of Education sets standards that many other states adopt because the publishing companies say, we can't write 2 books, we can only write 1 book. Now, we can change the cover on it, but it's the California standards that very much control much of society today. Incidentally, that's not only the California standards that control education, it controls your mattress and your couch and your car and your lawnmower and all. You know, how many of you have a tag on something that says may cause cancer in California? California has capitalized on using its state legislature to control what your child learns and what products you can buy, and on that you can go. But in the classroom, still I would say today, the local school board, the local administration, and the teacher can, in spite of utterly terrible curriculum, they can turn all of that because there's not a monitor in the classroom. And they can, depending on, again, who the school board and the education is, I would say, even though, you know, if I were raising children today, I think I would homeschool them in classical education is what I would do. But that said, I would never say, so I don't care who's on the school board. I don't care what public schools do. None of my, it's not mine. I would say, wait, that so much shapes our community, maybe I'll run for school board myself or get someone who will. I wouldn't I wouldn't be hesitant to say it's the local school board that might have more impact on your town's future than anything else because of the matter in which they're able to shape things. The teaching philosophy, curriculum-based education designed to get a child to adopt information with largely progressive worldview. I follow a little Facebook group post, a group in my community called Taos for Rent, I think, Taos for Rent. It has places for rent in Taos. I'm not looking for a place to rent. But somehow I got in it. And now I follow it for sociological purposes. And guess what I've discovered? I am in a town full of socialists. It is, I saw one the other day. A traveling nurse said, looking for a place to rent for 6 months. I'd like it furnished. I'll move out in 6 months. I'll pay utilities. I can pay up to $2,000. $2,000? We don't need these rich people in our community like this coming to destroy everything that we've built. Don't you? Who are the people that rent their places for $2,000? Those capitalist pigs? When you read all this, you realize there are socialists all around us, right on the verge of workers of the world unite. Now, where did they all pick this stuff up that you're not supposed to? I remember one comment about rent, and the woman was blaming the homeowners for how much this stuff rent, and someone tried to argue a little against it and said, well, he's got expenses that he's got to cover and whatnot. Well, it's not my job to pay his expenses. This is the idea society just owes us a house. It's to provide it. I follow another one about jobs. And woe be to the person who puts a job out there for less than $15 an hour, because they will be excoriated. Is that the word? Some of my Christian education coming through. For not providing a livable wage. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-hour job anytime you want it, and it pays $14 an hour. You pick the time, you pick the place, we provide everything and give you a kiss at the end. Doesn't matter what any of the details are, it must be a livable wage. Now, where are they coming up with all this? Well, right there, get the child to adopt information with a largely progressive worldview. The challenge in Georgia, which is fairly conservative, but you do have Stacey Adams. Abrams. Yeah. See, I'm far enough away that the challenge is that the bulk of the voters is coming from an agenda-based education in the cities, which is going to be very different from what's coming right here in Calhoun, Georgia, and Adairsville and all this. And you're up against a socialist future, honestly. An LGBTQR elemental P plus socialist future. Because that's the agenda out there. And if you find, go to any college campus, even a Christian college campus where they came from conservative homes and whatnot, you'll find, I would guess, up to 50% of the people, of the students on a Christian college campus, they are leftists, leftist progressives. And they've been taught that. Their home didn't teach it, but they spent 10 hours a day in this public education system that had them adopt that progressive worldview. The marks of an educated child is a child who passes tests and possesses social skills to gain entrance to a college. And that key right there, to gain entrance to a college, that became the have-to. This is what public education was designed to do, is get people into college. And it doesn't matter if the college is absolutely worthless and you're going to end up with so much debt and never be able to pay it back and all that. Who cares? Get them into college. That's unfortunately what so many of these schools are done. Where you find it, government-funded, politically controlled public schools. Now, I'm going to not give you a break yet. Got one more I want to look at. Two more. Liberal arts and practical arts beyond higher education. It used to be that when you finished, let's say, high school, you went either into a liberal arts education or a practical arts education. Now, this is really talking about classical education. More so than what we talk about today. In a moment, we'll talk about liberal arts then and now. But it used to be, the philosophy of liberal arts was the study of fundamental issues. When you knew fundamental issues, and you knew them well, guess what? That would liberate. Liberal arts was to liberate. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And so a person who got a classical liberal arts education, they knew geometry and astronomy and music and literature and all these kind of things. They just knew a whole bunch of everything is what liberal arts education was. And that knowledge, a large knowledge base, was able to set them free. Or a theology degree. And that's what they provided. And the theology was the study of God and his revelation of mankind. Then if you went to college, to Harvard, that would have been your two choices, philosophy or theology. If you were going into the practical arts, you would not have gone to college. If you're going into the practical arts, you would have gone into medicine, architecture, or law, for example, and you wouldn't have gone to college to be a doctor, but you would have what? You would have become an apprentice. And same in architecture, same in law. And you would have learned these things from an apprentice, and you would carry out these things, and you were trained in these areas. So college life was only that for years and years and years. Now college life is somewhat this, and liberal arts, let's talk about liberal arts then and now. Then liberal arts was the quadrivium that you see here. The trivium we've already done. Trivium was grammar, rhetoric, and logic. What happens, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, excuse me. What happens when you're done with grammar, logic, and rhetoric? If you went on to Harvard and you got a degree in liberal education, liberal arts, you would have learned arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And all of those, we could talk about them and have a lot of fun with them if we had we could talk an hour on each one of those, and I know it would seem very exciting to talk about an hour on arithmetic and geometry and music and astronomy, but do you know they're all means of measuring the way God has revealed himself in this world? And music was looked at very mathematically, and astronomy. Geometry is more the measurement of space than arithmetic, which is this thing of numbers that was looked at. Now, if you get a liberal arts education, it is going to be specialized instead of generalized, which means you're not really getting a liberal arts education, are you? A liberal arts education is supposed to be generalized, not specialized, and it fails to provide a broad base for the development of liberty. I think a liberal arts education, sometimes today it's called a degree in classical liberal arts. There's some value in that. And most of our founding fathers, if they had education beyond the trivium, that's the kind of liberal arts education that they had. It was valuable. Now, very often, driven by ideology rather than information, thus failing in the very foundation of a liberal arts education. Again, liberal arts was not supposed to give you philosophy. It was supposed to give you a lot of information about a lot of things. And that became valuable, to have a lot of information about a lot of things. And it was designed, now it's designed as an end in itself rather than the foundation for personal development. Again, used to be so many ages ago now, you probably had to go 100 years ago, to say a liberal arts education was designed to open up the world so that you could have anything that you wanted. You could go any direction that you want to go. Now you can get degrees. A liberal arts degree might include gender studies or the feminization movement among black politicians, or we sometimes used to joke about it. Remember underwater basket weaving? Got my degree in underwater basket weaving. I think the joke was on us, because you could take these classes or these courses that just were all about serving an agenda and not really about educating a child. And sadly, agenda-based education doesn't set us free, make us free. And that's where we need to be. Well, I tell you what, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to talk about the feminization of society and gender confusion. That ought to be fun, right? Stand up, take a break. We'll be ready in a moment. Those of you online, it's going to be the same broadcast. Just stay tuned. Okay, let's talk a little gender here tonight, and we'll be on page 22 of your book here, and let's see. I want to try to get my notes in order. Maybe I got it. There we go. The feminization of society. We could put these in a couple of different orders, but we're just going to leave it right there, like it is in the book. But I think that there, as you know, there is a great deal of. No, I got you wrong. Page 20, I knew there was another one there somewhere. The biblical world view of gender is where we need to start. And then we'll go to the feminization of society. So page 22. That gender, it seems like, is about the easiest thing that we could talk about, right? And there's boys and there's girls. Okay, now we're done. I was mentioning to Michael from Tennessee just a moment ago that even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had the kind of discussion about gender that we're having here tonight. Maybe we've heard, 5 years ago, maybe we heard of a few things, but we would not have had this discussion here, even of a biblical worldview, a biblical view of gender. There wasn't anybody in society, basically, that was arguing for anything other than you got boys and you got girls. And it's very easy to figure out which one you've got right from the very beginning. And yet now here we are in which, some people say, there's 28 genders, and other people say, no, there's 460 genders, and others say, no, it's fluid, it's not this or that. It's a continuum of where you are on all this kind of stuff. Wow, what a world we all of a sudden came into. And again, you think, just boom. I remember reading Sam Walton's autobiography, and the one thing I really remember out of it is he was talking about the success of Walmart, and he said, like most overnight successes, it was 20 years in the making. Well, this is something that came overnight and was probably 50 years in the making. And it was in the making in a lot of little things, in church education, in Protestant and evangelical liberalism that allowed it to come in, and education, and so many different areas in the agenda that in Hollywood and all these kind of things that brought it about. But let's look at a biblical view of gender, and gender is a matter of creation. There it is, that you were created as male or you were created as female. God created from the beginning male and female, and gender in the Bible was never selected and never open to change. And that is the worldview, of course, that all of us, I would venture to say, grew up in. I don't care if some of you grew up hippie on the mesa outside of Santa Fe. You grew up believing there's boys and there's girls, and it's fixed, and that's all there is in the world, and it can't be changed. There it is. So gender, the biblical worldview, is it's a matter of creation, the created order that God has made male and female, not only in humanity, but in the canine world, or in even in the cattle world. A cow's a girl. I know you have a steer, but the steer is a boy, right? And you got heifers and you got bulls. I mean, this is what you got in the animal world, whether it's the domesticated animal or the wild animal. In the plant world, there are boy parts and girl parts and all these kind of things. That's all there is. It's a matter of creation, and not only is it a matter of creation, but it's a matter of order. Since the fall of man, I think that we see that God has given leadership roles to the male and the supportive roles to the female. And that is not a matter of superiority at all. I don't think you can read the Bible and come to the end of it. And by the way, if you took everything on gender and even on the roles of men and women in society or in the home, it would take up a page, maybe two. I don't know. Maybe you could get 2 columns of 1 page in a Bible to tell everything the Bible says about male and female, and the man and the woman and the husband and the wife and their roles in society and in the home. Maybe you could fill up a page. We'll put Genesis chapter 3 in there, and we'll put Ephesians, chapter 5. But even at that, we're going to have a little portion of the page. And it's going to come down to, the husband is the head of the home. The wife needs a head that is covered. That is, her husband needs to be covered under Christ. A wife needs a Christian home, Christian husband. And husbands, love your wife, and wives, obey your husbands. Any questions? It's so plain and simple in the Bible that here are these roles of society. Basically, you've got God, and you've got you've got Christ, and you've got man, and you've got woman. And then you've got the children under there. And again, that's the society that we grew up in, and everyone really kind of understood all of this, and it began to change. When did it begin to change? Again, I think we could argue it. Was it Rosie the Riveter, or was it in the 50s and 60s? Was it the sexual revolution? Where did it begin to change? It's hard to pinpoint exactly the spot, but certainly it did begin to change somewhere. But gender was a matter of order, not because women were inferior to men, but because if God didn't put some kind of order in a fallen world, we were all going to kill each other. And so he placed this order in society to say, this will keep you from killing each other until I get back. We could, that's another thing we could talk about forever. It was a matter of creation, a matter of order. It was a matter of identity. You're identified as a male or a female. And the identity of the male in the scripture, when you look at it, I think was providing, protecting, and prospecting. That is, risk-taking. I needed a P word. And the man in the Bible was always seen as the provider, the protector, and the prospector. I remember hearing, somewhere along the way, probably high school, maybe college age, I remember hearing people tell men, don't make sure your identity isn't all wrapped up in your career. Sounded really good, right? Because men come and say, hi, I'm Randy White, I'm a preacher, or, I'm Bob, I'm an electrician, I'm Peter, I'm a doctor, whatever. But what happens when you retire? You won't know yourself. Kumbaya. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, a man's role really is, how do I provide? This is what a man does. He's a provider. And how do I provide? I provide by being a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, whatever it is. And this masculinity really is part of my identity. I'm the provider. I'm the protector, and I'm the risk taker in the home. And I think that is, that is so much. If our boys are raised to say, you get out and provide. You get out and put the food on the table. You get out and you protect the home. You get out and you do a little risk taking so that when you get to be 95, you can say, I want to retire. I want to sail the world now. And it's going to take a little risk to do that. Men, this is what we do. We provide, we protect, and we prospect out there a little bit to dig in. And to a certain degree, and I'm thinking protection and prospecting especially. Again, I use that because it's a P word and I'm a preacher. But that risk-taking, some women are predisposed to risk-taking, but much more, wouldn't you agree, that men are the risk-takers? This is why they all die from falling off the ladder. and all these things that, why were you doing that? Well, because I'm a man. That's why I was doing that. And men are that. Women, let me just say something here to any woman in the room who might need it. I hope that you have a husband that will tell you when it's time to worry. Because women who are not prospectors, this is not their identity, they tend to worry much earlier than they need to. And I have seen a lot of women sort of wreck their lives and their family because the husband didn't say, I'll tell you when to worry, and it's not time to worry yet. And I know some of you women are thinking, we'd be dead by the time he worries about something. But the truth is, you're still alive. It's okay. On the drive home, we've had forest fires in New Mexico, and we happen to live in the forest, in Carson National Forest. And there's a big fire not far from us, and it's windy and all that kind of stuff. And Shelley was just frantic all weekend as I was driving, and I kept trying to say, the fire is like 30 miles away, and the wind is blowing east, and we live to the west. Physics means it's not going to burn our house down. You can rest comfortably. So that fixed it all. She didn't worry anymore. Now, but it is kind of the man's role to say, it's okay. Calm down. Don't worry. I'll tell you when it's time to worry. And go with that. There is an identity thing. And what a value it would be if we helped our boys know, you provide, you protect, you go out there and risk a little bit. This is what we need you to do in the family. Here's a role here. For the female, the identity was found in tenderness, trust, and training. Our world needs a tender touch, doesn't it? And women tend to provide that tender touch much more than men do. And it's my wife often who tells me, you need to go call her. You need to shake that person's hand. You need to smile every now and then. You need to whatever it is. And she adds that tender touch that is so needed in a pastoral ministry or anything else to trust somebody. I think it used to be a beautiful thing in society when we had a little bit of mutual trust all the way around, and I think a lot of that came from our mothers. Our mother who taught, never opened her mouth, but she taught us, I trust your daddy. And that taught something about society in general and how that goes through. And then the training that the women have, both in the Bible, and it's even instructed in, is it 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, or Titus? It starts with a T. Where Paul instructs, the older women, the younger women, the young men, the older men, and he gives that instruction. And training is certainly a part of it. So our gender, male or female, a matter of creation, a matter of order, a matter of identity, and then a matter of production. And that we, as a society, as individuals and as a family, we're supposed to provide something. And men provided something from the ground, and women provided something from the womb. And we provided that way for the next generation and to make things better. And that in a simple way, and again, we could go into that much more, but I don't want to run out of time. So that's the biblical view of gender. Now, we have a world in which I think there has been a feminization of society. And my job is to convince you of that, although I might not have to convince you very hard because you probably looked around in our world a little bit and said, yeah, we've kind of feminized our world. And I would propose to you that feminizing our world has been a detrimental harm and will be much more of a detrimental harm as we go into the future. Let's think about a little bit about how, in terms of boyhood, our society has changed. All of you who are men, who are growing up and looking at boys today, would you agree that boys today have a different world than boys did when we were boys, right? And we used to talk about boys will be boys, and yet the problem is now Are they being boys? Have we unboyed them in even their activity? Back in the day, what games did we play? War games, right? Maybe it was cowboys and Indians. Excuse me for being politically incorrect. I'm not supposed to say either one of those words. Cow people and Native Americans. Maybe it was cowboys and Indians. Maybe it was soldiers, whatever. We played war games. We played King of the Hill. We played dodgeball. And we can still taste that ball, right? Does anybody play Red Rover anymore? I don't know if kids still do that, do they? They'll do it at your Pleasant Olive VBS. Yeah, oh, good. Okay, it's a manly church. Somebody's going to lose an arm, but we play tough games. Hunting, fishing, fixing something, building something. I remember as a kid that if there was ever an extra board and a nail around, I was building a fort. I didn't, and if I couldn't find enough boards and nails, I would go through the neighborhood and find somebody else's junk boards and nails, and we were going to build something. We were going to fix something. We were going to tear something apart, and then we were going to fix it and figure it all out. And this was part of being a boy, and guns were encouraged. We got them when we were kids. The cap gun. Can you smell those? That cap gun? Yeah. And certainly there's still a little bit in which boys will do some of those things today, probably especially in North Georgia. God bless them. But it really, even in boy toys, things are so different today in what they have. Now it's video games, weak cartoon characters, the masculinity out of the, remember Popeye, the sailor man? Doot, doot. Now you got indoor playgrounds with cushions and group activities instead of individual activities. The group activities we had growing up were when several boys decided to play ball out in the street together, right? You can remember as well as I can remember, getting on the bicycle or whatever it was and being gone miles and miles and miles away from home, and Mama was never going to be able to get to you and had no clue where you were. If they kidnapped you, you were going to be dead forever. But Mom knew you were going to be home by supper. And if you weren't home by supper, sorry, you missed supper. Now go do your chores. With no helmet, that's right. It's a different world in the way little boys play today. I mean, I graduated from high school in 1983, but I still remember then that my friends drove to school with a rifle in the rack on the pickup and left it out with the windows rolled down in the school parking lot, and nobody thought a thing of it. And today, they're thrown in jail for accidentally thinking about a gun. So it's a totally feminized world, I think, in boyhood, in education. Used to have recess, right? I don't know. I think schools are maybe going back to recess a little bit. Do you know anything, Drew, about elementary recess especially?
They have it as a part of their day.
They have it. Morning, afternoon recess, that kind of thing. Yeah. For a while, schools were getting rid of it altogether. No recess, and I think the teachers finally decided we're having recess. Send them out there. But at recess, remember the 3-story monkey bars that you climbed up, all that kind of stuff to get rid of the energy. And how many of you ever saw a school fight? And maybe it was just my school, but I don't remember the teachers ever breaking it up. I think the teachers were looking out to see when it was done, so they knew when it was safe to go out. But the idea was basically, let them fight it out. Work it out. I am a fan of The Rifleman. Have you all watched The Rifleman? You should. Uh, any time there is a school scene in the Rifleman, you can know there's going to be a fight. Some boy is going to beat up another boy, and they always just let him beat him up, and he deserved it too. But you kind of gained a little. Okay, let's take care of this quickly instead of just letting it fester forever. They're not actually going to kill each other. So out on the playground, a little playground fight, more power to you. Maybe I'm overemphasizing that a little bit, but certainly sports were a big thing, of course. Shop class was a big thing where, in the 7th grade, we were welding, with fire. And all those kind of things where you were, it was sort of dangerous, dealing with all that kind of stuff. And it needed to happen, and it was fact-based learning. Boys are pretty good at fact-based learning, not feeling-based learning, but fact-based learning. Now, in education, again, it's gender confusion, which is often brought about by the educational scene itself. Now it is a very feminized approach, lots of discipline set up straight, and work in your group, ideological-based learning rather than fact-based learning, and it's just not really designed very well for boys. And I think it's no surprise that the boys aren't doing very well with it. Boys would do better in a one-room schoolhouse, figuring out the facts and then going to kick something, and growing in that way. Education has changed. In leadership, it has changed to be a man and a woman. Everybody in the world we grew up in knew about authority. They knew the policeman had authority. They knew the librarian had authority. They knew the teacher had authority, and the principal had authority, and he had a board too, the board of authority that he carried with him or hung on his office wall. And the authority was expected, the person who was the authority was expected to exert that authority. That authority was supposed to be used, and it was supposed to be used for the child's good and the common good, and that authority was carried out. Today, leaders are supposed to There's no wrong answer. Everybody has a place at the table, and leadership has gone. There's not this masculine, militaristic kind of leader in so many places in the society today. Now, how about in church? This church may be an exception, but men in the church, leadership positions were filled almost exclusively by men. You had the Women's Missionary Society or whatever it might have been that had just the men got together and they decided, the men, hey men, stay after church. Got some things we got to figure out, and the men did it, and the men were the ones that prayed, the men were the ones that preached, the men were the ones that taught, except in children or a singles ladies class or something like this, and whether it was formal or informal, men made the decision. Think about church today, and women often run the church, if not from up front, which you see a lot today, but if not from up front, they run it from behind the scenes, and a vast majority of the preaching and the ministry is very women-oriented. And I don't think it's any surprise now that in fact, I think Pastor Eric was saying it at supper table. The men out there, real men, say, church is a place for the women and the children. And we made it a place for the women and the children, or let it be a place for the women and children. And And that, I think, has been unfortunate in the church. And to make a male-friendly church does not mean that you have to grunt a lot and serve biscuits and gravy, though biscuits and gravy are good. But it does mean, I think, that you have to honor the role of the man in the family and in the church and in the leadership, and you have to provide the kind of thinking that the men are going to appreciate, and really from facts and logic and rhetoric. If you provide that, men in our society will kind of gravitate to it, and they will go to it. In clothing, have you noticed a change? Do any of you ever see those, what do you call it, the runway things, where they have men's fashions, sort of, the fashion shows kind of thing? Internal celebration of fashion designers or something, because I've never seen anybody wear something that would look like that, and we would all laugh if they did. But the stuff that they put men in is absolutely embarrassing, even for a woman. Nobody would ever or should ever dress like this. But in some more subtle ways, there have been changes in clothing. It used to be that men's clothing was distinctly different than women's clothing. You could easily tell this is in the men's department and this is in the women's department. And that began to change probably, I'm guessing, in the 1960s or 70s, where women began to dress like men, and maybe men began to dress a little more like women. Remember bell bottoms? No, you don't remember bell bottoms. Look like a skirt that you're wearing anyway. But in the 70s, men, I think Saturday Night Fever or something, men began to wear high heels and began to wear silk shirts and all these kind of things that really, that was high heels and silk. That was in the women's shoe department and in the blouse department over there. But it began to change. There began to be a feminization of male clothing and a masculization, if you will. I was fairly young, but I remember some of the discussions about, did you see she wore pants? She wore pants to church last Sunday night. Some of you ladies remember that, don't you? The great pants debate of the 1970s. I don't think I ever saw my grandma in anything but a dress. And she was, she worked in the garden and she wrung the chickens' necks and everything else, but she always had a dress on. And now she was born in 1910, I believe it was, and so certainly, that was a long time ago. But there was in Grandpa and Grandma's gym. This is the man's, this is the woman's. And that has changed in our world today. The attire for men, the business suit was standard. And it didn't matter if the business suit was 20 years old or 30 years old or 40. The only difference was the lapel was a little wider, a little narrower, a little wider, a little narrow, a little wider, a little narrow. That's the only thing that ever changed. That was business attire. And the work attire was tough. It had steel in them toes and all that kind of stuff, and it was designed to last. And the recreational attire was minimalistic. Now, what do I mean by that? Actually, I pulled a few articles, I think. You can read those, can't you? Sorry, I don't have these in print for you, but let me see. Actually, you can't read any of it. But this one over here on the, what would that be, on the right? This is a picture of a swimming pool. Swimming pool in, I think this is in, trying to read that, a town in Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And they had a swimming pool at the school. And this was celebrating the opening of the swimming pool. And you probably can't see, can you see the boy on the diving board right there? He is naked as a jaybird. And if you read in the caption, it has his name and his address. And it says in there, boys swim nude, girls have to have a uniform, a swimsuit on. Now, granted, this was a little bit before they had developed the quick dry cloth, and the swimming pool filters were a little newer, and they were having problems with lots of cotton getting in the filters and all that, and they decided, just take it off. It's easier to swim naked. And the reason I bring that up is because, do y'all let your boys swim naked at the pool? And now, it does say the girls and the boys are separated there. But the article reads, and I can get you a copy of it if you want to go back and read it. The article reads as, well, obviously. There's absolutely no thinking at all that the boys are naked. No, it just says the boys swim naked. This other article right here, school swim lessons, school swim schedules announced. And it talks about the various, both of these are, I believe, from the 40s, maybe the 30s. Both of these, this school swim schedules announced. Again, it goes through there and it tells who the teachers are and when you're supposed to swim. And it says again, the boys swim nude and the girls have to have a suit. And nothing about it. I started following, and when I discovered that, and I followed through a little bit, about the 1940s, they began to it was interesting. Every article I read had some mother going to the PTA or the school board saying, "You're making our boys swim naked." And I found one article about it, and they asked the local preacher's opinion. And the preacher, this was right at the beginning of World War II, the preacher said, "Well, the boys are soon going to go off to the Army, and I don't think they care then." It was such a standard thing. Now, what has happened, let me back up here, is that, let me just try to put this, I'm about out of time. Put this in terms of a philosophy. The more feminized the society has become, the more dressed, covered up the boy has become. The more masculine society, the more the woman is covered up. You can almost, this is my own theory here, so you can question the assumptions. You can almost look at a society and say, who's showing skin? They're the ones in charge. There's almost something about a shame in covering that says we're in charge. Watch a newscast sometime, and the women on the newscast, do they show any skin? Especially if you get to a national broadcast. Sometimes you're thinking, is this a late night show that I accidentally stumbled on? I think that there's something about saying men don't show any skin at all. Women flaunt it. That says the ladies are in charge here. And as weird as it is, I'll say there was something about the boys going down to the swimming hole and swimming naked that said, we're in charge of this world. This is our swimming hole. We got it here. And now that there is this, the covering up of the American male, there's no male left. It has tried to remove the distinction between males and females, and so now in clothing, men's fashion is really unethical. Men's business attire is slovenly. Again, you used to know when a man had a job. Even when I began in ministry, I graduated from seminary in 1990 and went to work immediately in the local church. And even at that point, if you had minister in front of your name in any form or fashion, it was expected you would wear a suit to church. That's I became, the first pastorate I took was 1992. I was in a little farming town in Texas, Monday, Texas. It's between Sunday and Tuesday. And there in Monday, Texas, again, 1,600 people in the town, and most of them were farmers. And their wives were educators down at the school. And I lived right next to the church and the parsonage, and I wore a tie every day. If I was going to the office, I would put on a tie. I would have a jacket there. I didn't always wear the jacket because it was a farming town. I could be casual. Now, in fact, let me even say, in 1992, and I was in a Southern Baptist church. You know, they were liberals. In 1992, I would have never preached wearing this. I might have gone to the church picnic dressed like this, but I would not have preached dressed like this, even back then. Well, now, wouldn't you agree? Maybe it's different in Georgia, I don't know. But this would be a far step up from where you see a lot of young preachers on Sunday mornings these days. And it has become this thing that a man is not supposed to look professional. There is no professional men's clothing anymore. Why not? Maybe, again, I may be wrong here, but maybe it's because something in society says we don't want men in leadership. We don't want men who stand with authority. And we want men that look slovenly. They got their flip-flops on and their blue jeans with the holes in them and a T-shirt and all that kind of stuff, because if they were to dress in a suit, well, they would look like a person that had authority to them. And so it has more and more been removed. Men's work attire is based upon equality. Again, you can't tell the difference between a man's work attire and a woman's work attire. And recreational attire de-emphasizes manhood. Today, everything has changed about the way a man dresses at work, at play, at home. It's all so completely different today, and I think it's part of the feminization of society. Now, in the 8 minutes I have left, let's talk about gender confusion. Why is there created a scenario of sex assigned at birth being different from gender identity? A long time ago, you would have never seen the phrase sex assigned at birth. You can find it today. Sex assigned at birth, what is it, male or female? Which psychiatry now says that is different than gender. Now, we who don't understand the whole realm of this kind of thing, we sometimes say, you know, how can there be something more than a male or a female? And they would say, oh, well, that's their sex. We're talking about their gender. Okay. Psychiatry really has separated gender from sex. And so you can be a male assigned at birth, but your gender is one of these, who knows how many things they've come up with now, that this is your gender. So this is an issue that has been created by psychiatry, which, by the way, I know there might be one exception in 10 trillion, but basically, psychiatry is of the devil and you don't need it. Your pastor can do a much better job at helping you psychologically. And by the way, he can do it really fast. Remember Bob Newhart and the Stop It? If you don't know that little clip, go home and look it up tonight before you go to bed. Just put Bob Newhart, Stop It. Bob Newhart was a psychiatrist, and he told a woman who was afraid of being buried in a box, stop it, and charged $5. Now, the pastor can come and, or you come to the pastor and you say, you know, I got a problem. I don't love my wife anymore. Love your wife. Stop not loving her. You're supposed to love her. This is what you do. Go home and love her. And the psychiatrist will take that into a 32-session money-making cha-ching kind of thing. There's this field of psychiatry that is just so messed up, I don't recommend it at all. Biblical counseling, yeah, but it's so fast. It's so fast. And people don't like it that fast. They would rather be told, well, it's not your fault, and it takes two to tango, and it's, all these other kind of things, instead of just the biblical instruction that is given. Now, gender dysphoria. What is gender confusion? Gender dysphoria, again, that's the term they come up with, was created by the American Psychiatric Association to view the discomfort as a problem. It's the discomfort that's a problem and not the identity. So basically, the American Psychiatric Association came and, someone said, I don't feel comfortable with who I am as a male. They said, okay, well, let's deal with that discomfort. In fact, instead of saying, you're a male, this is your identity. Let's see what males are. Let's see if there's flexibility in the way male expresses himself, some of these things, but it became an identity issue. Gender-based on external genitalia should not be considered as an individual's true gender. This is what has happened in our society today. And this is a huge thing now, perhaps not locally, but it's a huge thing in public schools. That was the whole Florida law is, we're not going to talk about what gender this boy in kindergarten is. That's not, we do reading, writing, arithmetic. This is what we do. And the enemy took that and said, oh, they have this don't say gay law. And the law was actually, do math. Teach them how to read. Forget all of this other stuff. But they've created this gender confusion. Now, what is a biblical response? I think the biblical response is, number one, this is an abandonment of science. And we have to agree that science has nothing to say on the matter here other than you got boys and you got girls. Michael was saying, he just read an article that every one of our cells, or every strand of our DNA has masculine, feminine in it. It tells you don't even have to have all the parts to figure out, is this a boy or is this a girl? So science, if you want to follow the science, let's do it. Science says male, female. The biblical response ought to be really that cut and dried that, hey, this is a scientific issue. There's males, there's females. We're done with it. This basically removes all real problems and makes feelings the problem. And once we in Christianity allow feelings to become the issue, not what gender are you, but how do you feel about this? Once feelings rule the day, do we have any hope for ever teaching the Bible? No, because the Bible is a book of words, and words have meaning, and they have objective meaning, and we've got to be able to teach objective meaning. This is one of the reasons I think the church needs to combat this issue, is because gender fluidity or gender identity or gender dysphoria says none of the facts matter. What matters is your feeling and your interactions with the facts. Remember, that's what Thomas Dewey was trying to get with all of the facts, is let's do away with facts, because facts for a progressive are problematic. Facts for someone who rejects a biblical worldview are problematic, because all of creation shows forth his invisible attributes. Just everywhere you look in facts, it starts speaking about God, doesn't it? So the agenda is we've got to get rid of facts. And that started in so many different ways back then. And now all of a sudden this overnight thing that was 20 years in the making, or 200 years in the making, who knows how long, it came along and boom, we've even done away with the fact of man and woman, male and female. It's done now. And it's all part of the agenda. I think the agenda to simply attack this book right here, because this book is a book of facts. And if you can make this book offensive from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, male and female created he them, in the image of God created he them. If you can immediately make it offensive from that point, where we have to stop believing it at verse 26, they actually worked in the science class a lot sooner than verse 26, didn't they? If you can undo Genesis chapter 1, who cares what the rest of it says? And by the way, nobody knows what the rest of it says, for the most part, in our society there, because they took away the facts of Genesis chapter 1. The Bible only presents two genders, but allows a wide range of expression of those genders. I really don't. I think you all would agree with me. Is there a problem with a male who likes to cook? No. Is there a problem with a male that likes to sew or paint a picture or whatever it may be? No. There are so many different ways for a man to be a man and yet still be a man, and to keep it there. And I think certainly and even in some of the things we have said tonight, we don't want to give the idea that you're not a real man. You know, if you hadn't shot a pig lately out in the woods, all covered in mud, naked, well, we don't want to give that that is the identity of a man, and yet. I think there are ways, what are the words we used earlier? Providing, protecting, and prospecting. Not all of them have to be the great white hunter in order to do those things that are male. So the Bible certainly has a wide range of expression of those genders. I mean, you can see that as soon as you get to the story of Jacob and Esau, can't you? And Jacob was, I don't know, would we call him a mama's boy? I don't know if that's a nice thing to say or not. But he seemed to like the things around the home and cook the porridge and all that kind of stuff. And Esau was the guy that liked to be out there hunting and grunting and doing those things. Was one of them more of a man than the other one? The Bible gives zero indication that Jacob's masculinity is to be questioned because he's at home in the kitchen and mama likes him better than daddy likes the other boy, whatever. And so the biblical response really can be, hey, you want to be a florist or a nurse or a teacher or what, some of the things that maybe the society in some way says this is a woman's role. Go for it. You can do it. And yet you're a man, and you're going to be a man, and you're always going to be a man. The expression of personality can be fully embraced by biblical Christianity, but male and female are fixed realities that should be embraced with a person's developing personality. So you got a boy that wants to cook. That's his expression. Teach him to be the richest chef there is. Provide for the family through this. And care for it. You got a boy who likes to pick flowers and put them in a vase. Go for it. Make it beautiful. And teach them, what's the Fibonacci? Fibonacci. Thank you. What do they call it? The Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci's. I just throw that out there. If you're going to be a florist, you should know the Fibonacci sequence. That was free. But the Fibonacci sequence tells us what is beautiful in this world. There's this number, 958. It's a ratio that architects know it, artists know it, florists know it, if they're any good. Now, maybe they inherently know it, but hey, take something like painting and put some math in there and say, hey, do you know all things beautiful in this world have this ratio? This is the way you need to go. If the reason your picture is ugly is because it does not have the Fibonacci sequence. You can take anything and go with it. So their personality, sure, embrace the personality, but male and female, again, fixed realities that should be embraced with a person's developing personality, that you are a boy and you are a girl. And boys have boy parts and girls have girl parts. And boys later fall in love with a girl and girls fall in love with a boy. And sometimes they all have different personalities. And the girl might like to work on cars and the boys like to work on cakes. This can all be okay within the realm of boyness and girlness. But you're a boy and you're a girl. And this is how the world goes on. And as the boy, there's certain roles that you have, God-given roles that you fulfill. One of those is providing. You might provide it by being a florist. You might provide it by being a sniper, whatever. But you go and you provide these things, and we can embrace a lot of that, and we can help our boys as they're growing up, and help others in society that do get so confused on some of these issues, and help them to develop into healthy young men, even if their personality is a little different. And I'm afraid that today what's happening is if you've got a little boy who shows any slight femininity at all, what has happened is the world has said, make a girl here. Let's take this and make a girl. And so if you've got a boy, by the way, that has some of those more feminine traits, my word is get them out of public schools. Get them in a place where they're going to safely be raised in masculinity with that personality, because somebody in our society will take that and so have them so twisted and confused by the time they're 12 or 13 years old. But before you even know what's happening, they'll be twisted and confused, and that's a situation in which they need to be right there close to you, and you helping them to grow in their masculinity, or for a girl in femininity. Biblical sexuality is one man, one woman in the confines of marriage. Again, that's true. That's as true for Jacob as it is for Esau. One man, one woman. I shouldn't have used the illustration of Jacob because he had two wives, but nonetheless. Okay, tomorrow morning, let's tell you what. Let's talk about marriage in the. What time do we start? 9:30. Let's talk about marriage at 9:30, and how to develop a biblical worldview at, what's the next time in the morning? 11 o'clock. And I'll see what else I missed. Would you like me to close in a word of prayer? I'll do it. Heavenly Father, we're grateful that you made us male and female for the different traits that we have as men and women. We're grateful that not all men are alike and not all women are alike. We're grateful that we have personalities, individual. We're grateful that you have given us some instruction in society that helps to build a world that works and provides and makes this world that's under a curse be sufficient for each one of us, and to build happiness and harmony in our families, and purpose and meaning in our life. We know that we live in a society that is sorely confused, dear Heavenly Father, and the remedy they're bringing for the confusion is just going to cause greater confusion. And sadly, in history, that has ended up in death and destruction and tyranny. And so we pray that just by training our senses to see some of this, we would be able, dear Heavenly Father, to make an impact into our society that would be helpful. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you, and I look forward to In the